In this lesson, we're going to be discussing landscapes. We're going to be spending some time looking at our reference table, page 2. So if you would, make sure that's out today when you're going through our lesson and listening to our notes on our video. You are also have your reference table nearby so you can, again, look at these different landscapes. This isn't something that is new. These are not going to necessarily be words you've never heard before, but again, we're bringing them back up and hopefully adding some information to what you previously knew about some of the different landscapes that you have seen. Here is a picture of Mount McKinley in Alaska. Again, Mount McKinley being a mountain, and we're also going to be talking about plains and plateaus. So here is a picture of the landscape of New York State, and if you would take a minute and try to orient yourself and figure out what direction are you looking in this image. If you look here, you'll see Cayuga Lake, Seneca Lake, but you'll see Watkins Glen and Ithaca. So we must be looking in what direction? And if you chose the south, you'd be correct. So we're viewing New York State from the south. Here you can see, I just liked this image because it gave you a picture of all the different landscape regions. Flat area down here and transitioning into the plateau region that we live in. And still you can see it looks like hills, but we did learn in our last unit that an agent of erosion, glaciers, came through and scoured out our landscape and left us these Finger Lakes, but also left us these hills that we have between, and if we could take a closer look, the U-shaped valleys that are there. So what is a landscape? A landscape is a region that has landforms related by similarities in shape, climate, and the geologic setting, meaning what happened to it in the past, plate tectonics, or even the rocks that were formed. There are three major types of landscapes that we're going to be talking about, which is plains, plateaus, and mountains. And we're going to talk about each one in small little sections, but you will be doing a lab later that will help you with these words. So the first one we're going to talk about are plains. Plains are low in elevation, so we're going to be talking about relief a lot. A relief of a land is from the low areas of the land to the high areas in that landscape. Plains have a very low relief, meaning there isn't a huge difference between the lowest elevations and high. And in here's an example of the Great Plains. You can see relatively flat when you look out over the horizon, maybe a few small hills, but again, they're not high in elevation. And any streams that are forming or running over the surface are going to meander all over. They're going to have, they're going to be able to move all over the surface. And the bedrock that's predominant in these areas is sedimentary rock. So make sure that you make a little note of that is going to be the common rock that you find. And down here, I show you an image of when sedimentary rock forms or sediments get deposited and buried, they form these nice horizontal rock layers. So I was trying to show that in the plains areas you will have nice horizontal rock layers if you were able to see any exposed bedrock. And the soil, if you look here, the soil tends to be thick and lasting due to low gradients, meaning there isn't a whole lot of erosion going on, so the soils are able to develop and grow and get thicker and thicker over time. And again, in the plains areas, the best soil, and it's very, very thick. The next landscape region that you will be seeing on page 2 of your reference table and seeing in your lab is what we call plateaus. Plateaus are raised area of land high above sea level, but flat. So raised and flat. So here's an example of this of being high in elevation above sea level, but yet when you look over it is very flat. We live in an area that is a plateau region, but you can't necessarily tell anymore because of the glacial action that happened and has removed a lot of what we would use as characteristics to help us identify. But what we can look for is the rocks that are there that are exposed. And in plateau regions, you will find sedimentary rock will be your dominant form of rock, but those rocks will be very nice and horizontal rock layers of sediment. And so that's what's one of the main characteristics of plateaus, raised land, so you will have a higher relief than the plains, but it will look flat overall like you have in the image here, and sedimentary rock is your dominant form. So our last landscape region are mountains. Mountains have the greatest relief. That means from the base to the height of the highest mountain, there is going to be a large difference in elevation. And so again, trying to show you different images. Here's an image of the Rocky Mountains. Here you can see the low-lying area on this side, but you can see here is this huge change in elevation. Again, over here, I'm not sure exactly where this is, but again, the mountains in the background. When you go into the mountains, you're going to know you're in there because the bedrock is going to be different. We were talking about the plains and the plateaus as having horizontal sedimentary rock layers, but here you're going to see not layers of rock that are nice and horizontal, but they're going to be very folded and bent and turned around, and they're going to be mostly metamorphic and igneous. And so that's when we're going to know we've transitioned from a plateau into the mountain regions. If you were to travel on Route 81 South and move out of the Binghamton area, where the rock layers are horizontal sedimentary rock, you keep going down and you get into the Pocono region area, and you're going to start to notice that the bedrock is tilted. It's not nice and horizontal with the surface. It's going to be bent and wavy layers of metamorphic or igneous rock. So if you were to take a look at this, here's a great example of what we call folded rock strata. That's that word we learned in our weathering unit. It means rock layer, but here you can see they're wavy, and they are not sedimentary anymore. They would be metamorphic rock, depending on what was going on here. But again, that's what I mean by folded and tilted. You might see these layers tilted, or you might see this folding as you're traveling down Route 81 if you were traveling into the mountain area. And again, I like this image too because you can see that this has been there long enough for soil to start to form on the top. So here are the major landscape regions of the United States, and you can see New York State is over in here. Okay, we have the lower, it says interior lowlands, which is really the plains. Here we have the plateau region, and there is some mountains up in here in this area. It's part of this Canadian Shield, but it is metamorphic in nature. And then again here we have some folded Appalachian igneous rock, or metamorphic rocks that you'll see here. So the question becomes, why does this happen? And so we were talking about over here, why do we have these kinds of landscapes developing, plains, plateaus, highlands, and so on? And first, it's geologic factors, and second, the climate of the area. Those two are going to work together to provide the different landscapes that we see here in New York State and around the United States. So the first one is geologic factors. What has happened to the land? Has it had upward movement, meaning mountain building, plate tectonics, plates coming together and pushing land upwards? Or has it had downward movement occurring, meaning that weathering and erosion has taken place and wearing down at the different places, different mountains, different hilltops, and so on? And also what plays into our geologic factors is the characteristics of the rocks that are there. Ones that are going to resist weathering and erosion are extremely important to a landscape development. And for instance, the Colorado River moving through the plains there, the Colorado Plateau, it's eroding downwards, and the ones that are the least resistant are being broken down and moving away. And valleys, here it says ridges tend to follow the hardest rock types, whereas you'll have valleys. That indicates that that's where softer rock was and was able to break down and be removed. This is a great picture of the Hudson Highlands, which is in New York State, and I'll show you where that is on our reference table. But here's the Hudson River flowing through the landscape and made it through the Hudson Highlands, which is a zone of really hard, rugged rock, but because of past crustal movement has created some faults, which are cracks in the rocks where water was able to move through. So here is very, hard, dense rock that normally wouldn't weather very easily, but in this little area was a zone of weakness due to some crustal movement, and the water was able to move right through it and remove it and then keep on moving down into the New York City area. Climate factors, if the area is humid, and we learned in our weathering unit that when you have hot, humid climate, they're favoring chemical weathering, which is going to help produce landforms and help weather and erode rock away. And then here it says desert areas sometimes have step-like profiles with flat hilltops and terraces. In other words, where you have the lack of water, it tends to be a little sharper in its landscape, indicating that it's very dry. The water hasn't been there to round out any of the hills and have any vegetation to grow to help protect the soil from that erosion. So you can really tell the difference between an area that has a lot of water and an area that's lacking water. So to conclude in our video, what I would like you to do is take a look at these two images, and I'd like you to make some notes in the box here, in the differences box. What do you notice in these two images that are different? I would like you to, make a list of what you see, what you're noticing in this image versus over here. And in the description here, it does tell you where these two places are, and I would like you to think about, why is this area looking the way why is it looking the way it is? What's missing here that is creating this landscape? And over here, what's here that is making this landscape look the way it does? And the other question I would like you to answer, that I will walk around and check after, is if this area was to increase the overall annual precipitation, what would you think is going to happen to this landscape if that was to occur? And write it in the space here too. This concludes our video on landscapes.